Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Midwest Glacial Lakes Partnership webinar. This one is focused on the Michigan Shoreland Stewards Program. I'm Joe Noner. I'm the coordinator for the Midwest Glacial Lakes Partnership. And before we get started, I'd like to share a little bit of information about the partnership and logistics for the webinar before we get started. The Midwest Glacial Lakes Partnership hosts these webinars to share science, management, and outreach efforts that are of interest to our partners. And you can keep up to date with these webinars by checking out our website at midwestglaciallakes.org. The webinars in the series will be added to our webpage alongside other webinars of interest with the goal of having 4 to 10 webinars per year. So we encourage you to check the website from time to time. The notifications for the webinars will also be provided through the Midwest Glacial Lakes Partnership's quarterly newsletter. So I imagine many of you found the webinar that way. If you'd like to share your experience or project results through a webinar, whether those are research results, education and outreach results, or on-the-ground conservation projects, please reach out to me via my email, nohnerj@michigan.gov. You can find that on our website as well, and I'd be happy to talk with you about a potential webinar. A little bit about the Midwest Glacial Lakes Partnership. For those of you that are unfamiliar with it, we're a partnership of professionals and stakeholders focused on conserving over 40,000 glacially formed inland lakes across an 8-state region in the upper Midwest. And we work together to protect, rehabilitate, and enhance sustainable fish habitats in these glacial lakes for the use and enjoyment of current and future generations. The partnership does 3 main things. It provides science, such as our conservation planner that provides information about every lake in the partnership, provides outreach and education to stakeholders and professionals through webinars like this, through news releases, Twitter conversations, and sharing materials related to lake conservation, and it provides funding for science, outreach and education, and on-the-ground rehabilitation on projects through our Lakes Conservation Grant. We actually released the Lakes Conservation Grant today, and so if you didn't receive an email from me, you can also find information about it on our website. It provides about $300,000 this year for lake conservation projects that benefit fishes. Just a few logistical notes for today's presentation. The presentation should last 30 to 45 minutes, and we'll hold the remaining time for questions. The participants will be muted during this webinar. So if you have questions, please feel free to ask them and use the question and answer function to submit them. I'll try to moderate those questions as we go along, and we'll try to get to all of the questions. There's in the slide you're looking at now, there's a little box with how to ask questions, and that shows the icon for the Q&A box that you would use to submit a question. If for some reason you have technical difficulties or would like to share this webinar with someone else that couldn't attend, we'll post the video of the webinar to our page on the website within about a week, and it'll have closed captioning, etc. at that point. So with that said, I will get out of the way and clear the way for today's speaker. Julia Kirkwood has worked as a natural resource professional for over 25 years, 18 of which were with the state of Michigan's non-point source pollution program. She's collaborated with community stakeholders to protect and restore rivers and lakes. She serves on multiple statewide inland lake partnerships and is the chair of the Michigan Natural Shoreline Partnership. She's enjoyed working on the development of the Michigan Shoreland Stewards Program and is currently working on creating more resources to help build more understanding on how to keep lakes healthy. So with that said, the virtual stage is yours, Julia, so take it away.
Great, thanks, Joe. Yeah, I really appreciate this opportunity to share information about this program. Though before I jump into the Shoreland Stewards Program directly, I just want to give a little background. Oops, hold on a minute. I can't advance. Oh, there we go. Just give a little bit of background of the program or how we got to this point. and how we created it a little bit. For the one thing though, I do work for the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, and I am the main contact person for the Shoreland Stewards Program. But I want to be clear that the program is actually officially a program of the Michigan Natural Shoreline Partnership. And I have been the chair of the Shoreline Partnership for, I think, going on 6 years, and have been involved essentially from the beginning, except for I think the first 8 months. And the partnership has been around for 11 years. We're going into our 11th year, and it was formed in 2008. And our mission is really about protecting Michigan's lakes through conservation and restoration of our natural shorelines. We do have a website, and there is a lot of information on that website, and we're trying to be educational about it and trying to provide as much information to help people in the state to understand the challenges and what are the options that we can use to protect our shorelines. So please check that out. We had 4 objectives, and we really wanted to take a comprehensive approach to addressing some of these issues that we're seeing for our inland lakes. One is we really wanted to have some informed contractors out there, people that knew how to do shoreline erosion control without having to use a seawall. So we developed a training program, and our first one was in 2010, and we continue to hold a contractor training annually. And we list our certified natural shoreline professionals on the website. We look at policy changes as well. So some of the challenges that we have here in Michigan is that we do not have statewide shoreland zoning. All of the zoning and land use control is done above the ordinary high water mark, is done at the local level. And at the local level, the planning and zoning can be done at the county level. It could be done at the township level, or it could be a mix in between. And there are plenty of communities that don't have any zoning at all. So that's one of the challenges that we're trying to address from a local perspective. We tried to address a couple of, provided some information to local governments on how to protect inland lakes, provided workshops. And then we also, at the state level, tried to encourage bioengineering through some changes in our permit categories and making it a little easier for people to implement bioengineering, particularly on our lower energy sites, and making it a little more difficult to implement seawalls. We also look at providing information on techniques that work and what are the challenges with that. And some of that is, it's always going to be a process, and there's always going to be more information to gather. So, and then finally, we look at that 4th component is the property owners. So, without the property owners' interest and knowledge, we're not going to have contractors that are able to implement these things. So our focus is on driving that interest, raising the education level of the property owners so that they understand that they have options instead of a seawall. And they also have different options, not just for the shoreline, but what can they be doing also on the rest of their property. So that brings us to one other issue that we have a challenge of through the National Lake Assessment. That the first one was done in 2007, and then the second one was done in 2012. And for Michigan, what the results show is that 50% of our inland lakes have poor lakeshore habitat complexity, which comes down to the #1 stressor for our inland lakes. And particularly if you start looking at the nutrient levels, when only about 10% of our lakes have nutrient issues, what that's saying is that we have a gap that we need to address. So that's the gap that our partnership is really trying to address in providing more information and education and action steps to be able to address that lake habitat complexity, because that is the #1 stressor of our lakes across the state. And in some areas of the state, it's worse than others, depending on development. And so what's that saying? That lake habitat complexity is the loss of nearshore habitat in the water and on the land, loss of aquatic plants, disturbance at the immediate shoreline, and then the loss of the vegetation on the land as well. So the Shoreline Partnership, our strategic plan had a goal of trying to create a statewide recognition program. What we were seeing is, in particular, the work that I do through the other work that I do through our watershed management and working with different groups, is that a lot of the different lake associations were trying to create their own recognition program. And every lake had different criteria. There was no consistency between the lakes. Every process was different, and it was highly volunteer dependent. So the volunteer people that were the driving force of these programs, once they stepped away, usually those programs would go by the wayside as well. So there wasn't consistency, and there wasn't a long-term sustainability built into those programs as well. And then the other challenge was there were a lot of lake groups that just didn't have any capacity whatsoever to even think about trying to build something like that, even though that there might have been some interest. So our program, what we're trying to address is looking at how do we create consistent criteria across the state that addresses an incredible amount of variety and variability between lakes, lake and lake properties, both in kind of the shape and the sizes. We also wanted to create meaningful standards that will help protect our lakes for the overall lakeshore health. But our number one challenge, we started thinking about this, is we were highly resource limited, both in staffing levels and financial capacity. We knew that we were never going to be able to have the capacity to do any kind of one-on-one site visits, or even just doing individual lake visits where we go to each different lake and talk about this and help them build a program. We don't have the staff to do that. In terms of financials as well, we might have been able to pull together some kind of funding to be able to create the system, but there was no way we could maintain a system of any kind of one-on-one system and looking at that long-term sustainability. So all of that, looking at those challenges, what that did is brought us to this concept of, well, why not do something online? And that led us to our online survey for recognition for our lakefront property owners who are managing their lakes through healthy practices for their property. And if you really want to know all the details about how the funds were piecemealed together to create this, follow up with me on that, because there's a lot of details and to work through. But basically, cost about, I don't know, $20,000 initially. And we got funding through different sources, through like our non-point source fund, through grants. The DNR, Tip of the Mitt Watershed Council was one of our partners and is a huge partner in helping us pull this program together. The Michigan Lake Stewardship Association and a group of lake associations up in the northwest part of Michigan, and the Huron Pines AmeriCorps program. And we did this over 2 years, and we met with the lake groups and held focus groups and to try to identify, well, what does this look like? How do we make this work? And this is what we came up with. So our online system was developed by the Land Information Access Association, and they created a framework for us, and which allows us to manage this. And okay. And so what we did is we divided our program and our property into 4 different zones. We have the lake zone, the shoreline zone, which looks at with the toe and the top of the bank in that zone, and that's highly variable between every property. So that was a real, trying to look at this, of the variability of the different properties, and how do we create an online system that allows for that variability, isn't too complicated, and is free and accessible to all lake property owners, whether they are part of the lake group or not. And then we look at the buffer zone, which for us, for this program, we're looking at the first 35 feet from the top of the lake bank. And again, that's highly variable of what that looks like for different properties. And then the rest of the property, we also want to look at how landowners are managing their upland. So these graphics are integrated throughout the program, throughout the website and the survey. And how we look at this is, we'll talk about the questions in a little bit and what that looks like. But our survey, what we really want to think about is, and how do we wanted to set some standards and really try to make some changes about what can we do for our inland lakes, and what does a healthy lakeshore property look like that can be protective of the lake and also provide reasonable recreational usage of the individual property. So we're looking, how do we balance that? And one of the research documents that we try to align with is the conservation guidelines for Michigan inland lakes that our Department of Natural Resources Fisheries Division completed a handful of years ago. And so we try to align our vegetation levels, our access levels, when we're looking at percentages to those criteria, and trying to be consistent with that information, which provides information about how do you balance our efforts and how do you balance access and reasonable use, as well as maintaining lake health. And not just for fish, but for frogs, turtles, birds, and other wildlife that utilize the lake and those nearshore areas, either traveling from the lake to the land or from the land to the water. What we also did is we looked at the question weighting. You don't see this through the system, but it's how it's built into how each of the different questions and answers are point system built into the system. So just to give you an idea, there are certain questions that are weighted heavier. So for example, like pet waste, fertilizer, and herbicide use and boat storage are weighted less than such things as the amount of vegetation that you have at the shoreline zone or the buffer zone and the upland zones. What are you doing with managing your aquatic plants? Are you removing them completely? What about your woody structure? And each of them there's heavier weighting on this because these are going to be most positively or negatively impactful on overall lake health. And people will say, it's like, well, but wait a minute, fertilizer can really add a lot of nutrients. However, if you have at your lakeshore in that first 35 feet, 75% of natural vegetation, that pretty much negates the use of even needing fertilizer because you're not going to have any lawn or very minimal lawn. So we're trying to look at what's most impactful and put the weight on that. So to get started on this survey, there are options for people to use. You get started, you can either take it anonymously or register. We really encourage people to register because they get a lot more information at the end, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But there are some challenges with this, and we do recognize that anonymous does bring a few challenges. But when we initially worked with our lake groups, we all were in agreement that there are people out there that aren't going to want to have an account, and they won't take the survey unless they can take it anonymously. And that does can potentially skew my numbers a little bit when I start looking at how many people are listed, because people who don't live on lakes or just want to see how the program works can actually take that, and I won't know who they are, but I can see if they've completed or not. So that is one of the challenges. But it does get more people into the program, and it's really about education. And at any time that anybody starts anonymously, they can at any time stop and register as well. And you can, if you've registered and you don't want to finish it and you've run out of time, etc., you can come back and start up again later. Or if there's a question you don't understand, you can stop and you can log back in and it'll take you back directly to where you ended. So just an example, what this looks like, and once you get into the survey, each question is going to have its own page. So we start out with the upland zone, and we'll work through the questions associated with the upland zone. And we'll provide different answers. And also, the bottom of each page, there are kind of like drop-down boxes here that you can click on. And under each of those, we'll provide a lot more information about what that question means, why we're asking this, and what we're looking for, and why we're looking for that. To provide some context, and if people don't understand, I was like, well, what does that mean? Use that, you can find more information there. And again, I said, you know, anytime you can register and save, that's an option to do. So in one of those drop-down boxes, what we do is we also provide lots of different pictures that provide annotation to help people understand, like, okay, well, my shoreline looks like this, so how does mine fit into this idea of it? Because it's really going to be about their best judgment. Because it's not a perfect system. We don't expect perfection. What we try to say is, like, use your best judgment based on the information that you're provided. And if you still are having some challenges, then you can, you know, contact one of us. Or also, I'll talk about this a little bit too. We have ambassadors out there that are starting to come and work with lakes as well around the lake. But one of the things we provide are these types of graphics up here, so that you can start looking at it from an idea about what those look like, to try to get in to see how you fit your property into that. There's 3 different types of graphics that look like this, so that you can get a better idea. Also, you know, there's different types of pictures, from different angles, different topics as well. So for example, in the upper left is like an example of a buffer zone that's got incredibly high percentage of impervious surface. We highly discourage impervious surfaces in the buffer zone, and that's going to affect the score fairly dramatically if there's a lot of impervious surfaces in the buffer zone. So this just helps people along the way, and as we go along over the years, we'll try to add more information as we go and update our information as best we can. And it also helps to show people that there can be landscaped ideas too. Like this one's a little more landscape, or providing a limited amount of access. So we have 3 qualifying levels that property owners can achieve. We have a bronze, a silver, and a gold. And if they don't qualify, then you'll be designated as a starter level. So we try to look at, well, what's that progression? If you're a starter level, it doesn't mean that you can never qualify. That means that you have some work to do. But the 3 levels, we provided 3 levels because there are standards that we're really trying to push the standard to a higher standard of, and a different kind of a culture out there of what lake health and protecting your lake really means, because it's more than just not using phosphorus-based fertilizer, having a few plants right at the edge of your lake. It's more than that. It's the overall lake management. It's looking at how you are managing your entire property. And we also provide a lot of flexibility as well, because we recognize that there are some lots that are smaller and may not be able to reach that gold level, and that's okay. So there's a lot of different flexibility built into these questions as well, and variability. So like we're not prescriptive about how it has to be. So for example, in the first 35 feet, if one person wants their access in the middle of their lawn or the middle of their property, that's great. Or they want to put it over on the side, there's a lot of variability and creativity that they can achieve within that as well. So, you know, I mentioned that you can take the survey, and you can be noted as a starter level. However, not every property is going to be able to qualify because the property has been overbuilt already. However, in this example of this picture, most of these properties, if they took the survey, actually none of these properties would initially qualify. What I see in here are a lot of good things. There aren't any seawalls. I don't see seawalls. I see a lot of excellent aquatic plant management where they're sharing the shore. They're not eliminating all of their in-lake aquatic plants. So that's a huge benefit. The biggest thing I see is huge amounts of lawn, and that's negatively impacts their score significantly. And there are a couple properties that have really high levels of impervious surfaces, like really large buildings that are taking up almost the entire size of their lot, and that's going to dramatically affect their score. And you know, and people are going to say, well, wait a minute, well, I bought my house, like I didn't build that, I bought it like that. Why should I be penalized? And I should be able to be a shoreland steward if I'm doing all the right things. Well, what we recognize is that, unfortunately, that house was built there, and that's not healthy for the lake. So, unfortunately, some people will be able to not qualify, and what we're trying to do is set standards and say something different. We can't have everything meets everything. Otherwise, there's nothing substantive about the program itself. However, not everybody can do everything, but everybody can do something. So this is something to think about. The other challenge is properties with seawalls. What we recognize is there are an incredibly high level of numbers of seawalls already in existence out there. And we did not want to automatically eliminate properties that have seawalls from participating in this. And the reason we did that is because they are in existence, and there's a lot of impacts that seawalls have, in particular because seawalls can erode neighboring properties as well. So protection of property, it costs a lot to remove, and it's not always going to be practical or feasible to do that. However, it does make it challenging, a lot more challenging for properties with seawalls to qualify, but there is a possibility for properties to qualify. Although after December 31st, 2018, any new seawalls, if were built, they would not be able to qualify for this, because while they are still legal to implement in Michigan and to install, obviously you need a permit. What we're saying, to be a shoreland steward, we are not allowing any brand new seawalls. That doesn't mean that if you have a seawall and you're replacing a seawall, that doesn't mean that knocks you out. It's just if you didn't have a seawall at all, and you're installing one, that you cannot qualify. And the reason we're saying that is because there are other options. Oops. Okay, hold on a sec. There we go. So for example, these two properties have seawalls, and these are two examples of properties that would not be able to qualify for properties that have existing seawalls. They've been too overbuilt with other types of impervious surfaces. The houses are too close, and there's just the one on the side is the lot is just so small that there isn't a lot of options for improvements anywhere. And the other lot, the wall is, that is never going to come out. The house is right there, and so those properties are just not going to be able to qualify. However, there is an option, for example, in this picture, where there is an old kind of railroad tie seawall that's kind of falling apart, and at some point the landowner is probably going to want to restore that or replace that. Here is an option where it could be restored to a more natural technique using bioengineering, that you're not using any kind of concrete. So this property could potentially qualify. There are other properties that have seawalls, and they're where the house maybe sits back like 200 feet, and in front of the house is just all lawn. There's a huge opportunity for a house to qualify eventually as well. So, and the other option is where houses and properties have existing seawalls, and what we're trying to encourage people to do is to reduce those impacts that seawalls have. So, for example, one option is putting riprap in appropriately in front of seawalls and planting into that riprap. Again, here in Michigan, we do need a permit for that. And then planting up above in the buffer zone area, reducing the amount of lawn and adding vegetation. Again, not everyone can do everything, but everyone can do something. Even if you don't qualify or won't be able to qualify for the Shoreland Stewards, what we're asking is, well, what can you do? If it's a 5x5 native plant garden or just adding a couple of trees, then that might be all that you can do, and that's better than nothing. Though you may not be able to have a property that qualifies, it's still better that you are adding to the overall collective habitat for your lake. So at the end, if you register, now I don't live on a lake, but I just go in and make this happen here. I was a starter level here, and this is what it looks like. Here you'll be noted what your level has achieved. It's starter level. It'll say either gold, silver, or bronze. And if you register, what you'll be provided is the opportunity to review your answers. You can go back and look at what you chose. And you can go back and get to the other information too on those questions. So it's like, oh, I missed that resource. Like, what was it? Well, you can go back and click on that as well. You can't change your answers, but you can get that information that you were looking for. And then the other thing that is provided are suggestions for improvement. If you click on one of these, it'll drop down and give you some general recommendations about some options that you could do to improve your score. It doesn't tell you how much your score will be improved, but again, the questions are weighted. So for example, like you can do some easy things like, all right, well, I can start picking up my pet waste. I can change how I do my broadcast spraying of herbicides and pesticides. The biggest thing that's going to have the huge impact on whether or not I'll be able to move up from my starter level is I need to start adding in some vegetation, both in the buffer zone and the upland zone. And then the other thing, I can print my report as well. And if I actually was awarded a certificate, I would be able to print my certificate as well. And that is, would be customized with my name, lake, and date on it as well. And then here's where I could do, so I got my starter level. I went and spent the next year or so making improvements. You know, I want to go back and take my survey again. So you have that option to go in and into your account and take the survey again. And what that allows us too is that we get to see the before and after. So what we can do is, from an evaluation standpoint too, is like we can show that our program is actually having an impact, making and helping people make some changes. If for whatever reason you finish and then you go back and I'm like, oh, I didn't answer that, I misunderstood that question, I need to go back and change that answer. Well, unfortunately, you can't go back and change that one answer because it's how the system is set up. But you can go in and just start the survey over. It clears your answers. If you made changes and you just want to take it again, it doesn't clear your initial answers. The other thing that we ask people and hope that people do is to upload pictures of their properties. It's not a requirement, but we do love to see these pictures of what's happening out there. Plus, we get tons of questions, and not just from people in Michigan, but in other states too. It's like, hey, do you have any pictures and some ideas about what I can do, and to give me some ideas of different kinds of properties? What are you looking for? So the more pictures that we have, the better we can say is like, hey, you know what? You can do stuff like this. Or here's some really cool ideas that might pique your interest about different options. So the more that we have to choose from, the better we can show other people and to continue this wave of interest and build on that as well. So we have certificates and signs. If for registered participants, they're provided a free certificate that they can print if they so choose. They are color coded to like the bronze, silver, or gold, the border as well. And then there is an option to purchase a sign as well. Again, those are right now they're color coded as well. And right now we offer 3 different sizes as well. And the sizes are not based on the different levels. It's just people can choose the different size. And those are purchased through one of our partners, through the Michigan Lake Stewardships Association. Let's see, okay. Another option that we built into the system based on our focus group of our lake associations, because, you know, they want to be able to promote the program. They wanted to be able to highlight participants and be excited and build the momentum around their lake and the excitement, and help change this culture and be more lake healthy and lake friendly. So we have an option for lake association registration. Lakes do not have to be official groups, you know, meaning official is like a 501(c)(3) organization. It could be just a loose kind of group just trying to make improvements around the lake. So on the website, there is some information about how to do that. And what you get is a couple of different features. Is your lake is highlighted on our website, and it provided an icon. And you provided access to resource materials on the website. And then there's also registration feature. So for example, if I lived on Lake Z and there's an association and my association has registered, when I go to register for my survey, in the drop-down box under Lake Association, I can choose my lake association. And at the end, kind of for lake associations, this is a really good tool because an email goes to them saying, hey, so-and-so completed the Shoreland Stewards survey, and they achieved a silver level or a bronze level or whatever. And that can, and in the annual meeting, they can provide an article or in their newsletter and highlight these and to provide ideas to other people as well. So just a couple examples of information resources is we do have a program guide. It is downloadable on the website, both the Shoreland Stewards website as well as the Natural Shoreline Partnerships website. We do have some hard copies. We don't have that many, but you can download it and read through it. We also have promotional cards that we have hard copies of those for lake groups to hand out. Also, these files are provided on the Shoreland Stewards website. There is a promotional card mailer, so if a lake group wanted to mail these to all of their property owners around the lake, they could just download that file and print them and mail them out. There is also information like an example news release or article for your newsletter, just to give some ideas of how to start promoting it around your lake as well. And for the sign files are also there too. If people so chose to, hey, I want to add our lake association logo to the sign as well. you can do that. We do require that the Shoreline Partnerships logo remains there, but you can do that and take the sign file to any kind of sign business to make your own signs if you so choose. We also just recently completed well, actually it's 98% complete, our Shoreland Stewards Ambassador Training Program. It's a self-directed online training. Their information is on the Shoreline Partnerships website. There's a little graphic talking about like, well, what's the progression of what do you do and how to get started. We provide a toolkit. So if a lake group has some people that want to get involved and engaged in this topic, they would then they go to the website and check out, okay, what do I need to do? And they can download the toolkit. They talk with their lake group. They can register their lake group on the website. And there's a series of PowerPoint presentations. I think there's 5 of them. They're short, and you work through them and gives you some ideas of how to start promoting, how to connect, and gives you some ideas just how to get started as well. There's other resources on the website as well. So just example how many participants we have. So for our program, we launched this in April of 2016. April 28, 2016, the website went live. We set goals for both 1 year and 5 year. So we're in year 3. And just to give you an idea of how we are doing, we've met and actually after year 1, we met and exceeded almost every one of our year 1 goals. I think we were just missing one of the year 1 goals. So we're getting pretty close on year 5 in some of these areas. Still, we got 2 more years to go. But the one thing that really kind of astounds me is that our initial goal for our first year and even at 5 years was 50,000 feet of shoreline. We're looking at linear shoreline that qualifies as a shoreland steward. And that seems like a really high number, but looking through the result, it adds up pretty quickly. And I didn't realize how quickly that adds up. So I'm really excited about that one. Now, is that number like perfect and an exact number? No, a couple challenges. One is for the first, 4 or 5 months, we didn't collect linear footage on anonymous participants. So we missed probably almost 100 people right there. And then I also know that there are some anonymous people that, just took the survey and made up some information. I don't think that number is really high. And some of those I can kind of see. One thing also for lake groups, I know that sometimes there are ambassadors out there that want to just like run a property through the survey without having an official like account. They just want to do kind of like a pre-assessment. What I tell those people to do is like, well, if you're going to do that for the lake name, just put test. So then that gives me an indication that that's just a test, and I can go through and delete those eventually. So out of all of the participants, we're looking at 73% of all the respondents, that includes the anonymous, qualified as shoreland stewards. And out of 84% of the registered respondents have qualified as shoreland stewards. Now, have people asked me, it's like, well, are people making changes? And it's like, well, I do know that there have been people that have made changes, but the large number of people that have qualified are the people that have properties that already initially qualify. And that is consistent with social science, of where it's really the initial adopters are the ones that are, this is really important to them. And this is at the forefront of their caring and the way they are around the lake. So these are the people that are the they're going to do this first. And as we see, as the program grows over time and continues, what we'll see are a lot more properties that are making the changes. Because the other thing, we're only in our 3rd year, so it does take time to make changes. And so I do know that people have made changes, but I expect to see that and more of that over in the next 10 years or so. Just to break down too, is like, you know, out of all of the participants, we look at, I think that's all the participants. It's like 196 reached gold. Or maybe that's just all the registered ones out of silver and bronze. So it's kind of an interesting breakdown. And so where are they located? So this is just a picture. There's only 50 of them identified on this map right here, because in the system, I can only have 50 show up on my viewing. So they're kind of strewn throughout the state. However, they're definitely more up here up in this northwest part of the state. And that's a result of the focus group, the lake associations that we worked with initially were already doing a lot of this stuff. And so they've built our program, and so there's a lot of information. They've been working quite a while, and so that's just expanded into other lake groups. And also as a result of a couple of organizations, Tip of the Mitt in particular up there, working with a lot of different lake groups as well in their service area to work and build on this program. But what we're seeing is when volunteers come online and start promoting, you'll see more participation in this program. The other thing that we're trying to connect to is trying to get people to do a whole lake shoreline assessment through our Score the Shore. It's through our volunteer monitoring program is one of the components. Or it doesn't have to be through that. You can do it through your other ways as well. You look at, okay, what's going on in my entire lake? And so it helps to identify priority areas, and it helps to track progress too. So you look at your whole lake, and then you work on the individual property assessment through the Shoreland Stewards Program. And people can go in and protect and make improvements, and another 5 years, go down and track progress. So if you are out of Michigan, what can I use this? I know that people outside of Michigan have used this program, and they've called and said, hey, can I do this? And what I say is like, yes, please, yes, go ahead and use it, but please register. Because what happens is that in this box here, when you, in particular, when you are anonymous, you have to choose a county, and the only counties in there are Michigan counties. And so if you choose a Michigan county and write your lake, I have no idea if you are out of state or not. But if you register, it shows as you being out of state. So that helps me so it doesn't skew my data. The other thing is right now too, we are working with Wisconsin for them to take this program and tailor it to Michigan or Wisconsin criteria information, just tweak it a little bit. So within the next year or two, that may be a possibility that this could be available in Wisconsin. So that's not final yet, but that's a possibility. So if other states out there are interested in expanding as well, please, give me a call and we can have a conversation. One other thing I wanted to mention too is that there are people ask about rivers and the Great Lakes. We don't promote this for rivers and Great Lakes, but I don't discourage it. I said, go ahead. There's a lot of information that's applicable, particularly the land-based stuff. Once you start getting to the water aspect and the permitting and the rules and stuff like that, that's a little bit different. So it doesn't fully apply to rivers and the Great Lakes, but I'm not going to go through and delete them. So I think there are all three Great Lakes Superior, Michigan, and Huron are represented, and I think at least 5 or 6 different rivers are acknowledged here. So I'm not going to discourage it, but I'm not going to promote it either because it's not fully applicable. So with that, I think I am done, and I'm open for questions if there are any.
Thanks, Julia. That was really interesting. And yeah, there are questions. You should be able to see them if you pop up, if you press the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen there.
Okay.
And if you can't, I'll read them. I think maybe we just go in chronological order. Do you see them?
Yes.
Okay, so
Okay.
I'll do Rex Vaughn's. If you want to read the question for the audience and then answer it.
Okay, let's see. So we have one question about policy changes. Were discussed at a conference that we held this past spring for our Shoreline and Shallows conference that we hold every other year. And I'm talking about some of the challenges about does Eagle, the Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, have the statutory authority to ban seawalls? As of right now, no. And I don't know all the details about this since I do not work in the permitting aspect. However, through the work that we've been doing over the past 10 years, we've been able to make changes in the permitting process and making it more challenging for seawalls, new seawalls to be put in. For example, the permit is more expensive and compared to more of a natural approach. And also on lakes that have very little development, permit staff have the option or have the ability to look at the natural resource damages or is there a prudent alternative component to that. And there have been denials for seawalls. So it's not just a blanket, hey, you apply for a permit and you're going to get a seawall. It's all site specific. So that's just a challenge there. But I will say that the work that the partnership has been doing of getting the message out has greatly, it's really starting to get out there. I'm going to go with, let's see, with a larger house property size ratio, how are gutterless roof drip zones, French drains, rain gardens, etc. for stormwater control taken into account in the rating? So what we do is there's one of the questions is on stormwater. And if the stormwater, it's asked about, well, do you have stormwater running directly into the lake? And how is that running into the lake? And so depending on how that answer is, if at the end at a recommendation, there'll be a recommendation that said, hey, you have stormwater running into the lake, and here's an option here's some ideas for you to address that stormwater. And a question about how do we ground truth our results? And how does it represent Michigan in the lakes across the state, like 6,000 greater than, since we have a lot of lakes greater than 10 acres. Well, part of the ground truthing aspect is using the photos. It's one of the reasons why we are asking for photos. A lot of the photos that I've seen that have been submitted, again, not a ton of them, are pretty consistent with the scoring results. Now, this summer, a few of us did go out on one of the lakes and looked at some of the results, and some of the results were a little like, yeah, I'm not sure that one would have met that criteria or not, but overall, they were pretty consistent. Again, everything is different, and there's a lot of flexibility, and the amount of the range of points for the different levels isn't just like, oh, this is 10 and this is 20. There's a range. So it's one of the challenges that we have in terms of time. We just don't have the time or the staff in order to really do a lot. So we're using different methods to be able to do that loosely. Let's see. So one statement is the demographics of where stewards are located follows closely with the affluency factor in the state. And asking, have any statistics been collected as to what the cost to deploy good practice versus a sheet pile seawall? Well, I don't know about statistics, but there is information out there about the costs of a seawall versus bioengineering. However, it's just, again, it goes back to site specific. And that's something that we talk more about when we get into our specific natural shoreline workshops. So depending on the site, if it's a really high energy site and there's a lot of wave energy, it's a huge lake, and the challenges, there's a lot of ice push, that is going to cost more than a site that has a very low energy, a very low bank. So again, it goes back to site specific. And as to the issue about where most of the stewards are located, following closely with the affluency factor in the state, that actually isn't it may look like that, but that's actually not the case. Specifically, the reason, again, why those are more of the lakes up there have people participating is they have strong lake association groups that have been working on this for a long time already, you know, even before the start of this program. And they have a watershed association out there that works directly with them. And there are a lot of water, and most of those lakes up there are covered in watershed management plans that have a factor and a priority based on healthy shoreline practices and protecting the lake. So there's a lot of different factors going into why that northwest area is has more participants, and it was one of the reasons of having approved non-point source watershed management plans in these areas initially that had shoreline inventories already completed, was one of the factors of why we chose certain groups to work with us. As to a question about if the Natural Resources Conservation Service, which is a service for the that really focuses on agriculture programs, assistance to help pay for shoreline improvements and naturalizing seawalls. No, not unless you are actually, I don't even know if they would help with the farmer. Now, has NRCS been involved in some of the engineering in some areas, depending on what's going on? Yeah, there have been aspects associated with that, but as far as I know, NRCS does not have any programs. And I will say there, for Michigan, is highly limited as well on funding to be able to help pay for this as well. There are some programs that can qualify, but this is one thing that our lake team, the different agency and organizations are working on, is, you know, one of the goals is build the program and try how can we help build funding as well. It's a long-term process. Let's see, what incentive do riparians have to become a shoreland steward? Is it simply bragging rights, or being able to post a sign, or are there other benefits? So as of right now, there aren't any other benefits unless lake associations or townships or counties incentivize it. There may be some tax, but, you know, some counties I know in different states have incentivized by tax reductions. But right now it's about how do you want to present yourself as a lake property owner. And one of the things going back to is cues to care is this is one of the culture aspects is Cues to Care is neat and tidy, and a lot of people are moving from very urban, suburban areas, and their idea of what a Cues to Care is neat and tidy lawns, and they're bringing that culture with them to the lake community. That culture is highly destructive, so what we're really trying to change is how do we promote this? So it's really about making the choices and making the decisions on an individual level, and then through a lake, how do we as a lake want to be as well? So it's a long-term process. I think I got them all.
Yep, I think that's it, Julia. Are there any other questions from the audience that you'd like to type in now before we wrap up? We'll give one more moment. Julia, I'd like to say thank you on behalf of the Midwest Glacial Lakes Partnership for participating and for sharing information about the Shoreland Stewards Program. And I would encourage folks, if you have any other questions, or if you're interested in potentially implementing the Shoreland Stewards Program in your area, to reach out to Julia and to talk more with her about the program. I don't see any more questions. So with that, we will conclude the webinar, and I encourage you all to keep up to date with the webinars for the MGLP by subscribing to our newsletters and checking in on the website. Thanks, and have a good day.